She was 22 and sleeping inside the waiting room of a closed bus station after losing the last place she could still call home. Every night the old plastic bench beneath her back groaned whenever she moved. The station smelled like cold coffee, wet concrete, and dust trapped inside cracked heater vents that no longer worked properly outside. Trucks rolled past the highway in long, lonely bursts, their headlights briefly lighting the fog windows before disappearing again into darkness. Her name was Clara Bennett, and everything she owned fit inside one faded green duffel bag, 3 sweaters, a flashlight with weak batteries, a pair of worn boots with one sole peeling loose, and a small rusted key that belonged to her grandfather. Most nights she wrapped herself in an old brown coat and tried not to think about how quickly a life could disappear. 2 months earlier, she still had an apartment, a job at a grocery store, a future that felt ordinary. Then the layoffs came, then the rent notices, then silence from everyone who once promised they would help. By the time winter arrived, Clara was sleeping wherever she could stay warm without being noticed. That was when she found a listing. Abandoned railway depot, $10. No photos, no explanation, just a phone number and a handwritten sentence beneath it. Must be willing to clear it yourself. Most people would have ignored it, but Clara called anyway. 3 days later, she stood beside an abandoned railway line in the middle of nowhere, staring at a forgotten depot buried beneath weeds and years of rain. The windows were cracked, the roof sagged, and the old telegraph office inside still had a wooden desk facing the tracks, as if someone had walked away in the middle of a message and never returned. But what she didn't know was, something had been hidden beneath that desk for nearly 70 years. And the moment she stepped inside the depot, the past quietly began waiting for her. Before we continue, stories like this remind you that hope can survive even in the darkest seasons of life. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel. And while you listen, think about the oldest object you still keep because of someone you loved. Sometimes memories hide inside the smallest things, and sometimes they lead somewhere unexpected. Clara grew up in a narrow railroad town in northern Missouri, where freight trains still shook kitchen windows at night. The tracks ran behind nearly every house. Children learned train schedules before they learned multiplication tables. And her grandfather, Walter Bennett, knew every sound a locomotive could make. He had worked the rail lines for 43 years, not as an engineer, not as a conductor, but as a telegraph operator. By the time Clara was born, telegraph systems were already becoming ghosts of another generation, but Walter still kept old habits alive like sacred rituals. Every morning, he polished his pocket watch. Every evening, he drank black coffee from the same chipped white mug. And whenever rain tapped against the windows, he sat beside Clara and taught her the rhythm of Morse code by tapping softly against the kitchen table. Dot, dot, dash, pause. To Clara, it sounded less like communication and more like secret music from another century. Walter used to tell her something she never forgot. Railroad towns remember everything. At the time, she thought he meant people. Years later, she realized he meant the buildings too. The depot, the tracks, the silence. Her grandmother, Eleanor, used to sew uniforms for railway workers during winters when money got tight. Clara remembered the sound of the sewing machine pedal moving late into the night while snow gathered outside. The Bennetts never had much, but they repaired instead of replacing, saved instead of spending. And in the far corner, the telegraph office, the desk still faced the tracks. A small brass lamp sat untouched beside scattered papers fused together by moisture and time. Something about the room made Clara uneasy. Not dangerous, just strange, as though the building had been waiting too long for someone to return. Wind moved softly through cracks in the walls. Somewhere deeper inside the depot, something creaked. Clara tightened her coat. For the first time since arriving, she wondered if buying the depot had been a mistake. Then she noticed something odd. The telegraph desk legs looked newer than the rest of the room. Not new exactly, just less worn, as if someone had replaced them years later. The thought stayed with her, quietly, like a splinter beneath skin. The first nights inside the depot were miserable. Rain leaked through holes in the roof. Mice scratched inside walls after midnight. And every time freight trains passed on distant active tracks miles away, the entire structure vibrated softly, like an old memory waking up. Still Clara stayed. She cleaned during the day, swept glass, dragged broken furniture outside, patched windows with plastic sheets she found behind a hardware store dumpster. Little by little, the depot became survivable, but strange things kept happening. One afternoon, while cleaning the Telegraph office, she noticed deep scratches beneath the desk. Not random scratches. Lines. Intentional. Almost like markings. The wood around them was darker too, as though oil or soot had soaked into it long ago. That same night, Clara heard a faint metallic sound beneath the floorboards. Clink, then silence. At first she blamed pipes. Or rats. But the depot had no plumbing left. And rats didn't sound like metal touching wood. The next morning she searched the office carefully. Nothing. Still the sound bothered her. Days later, while removing warped floorboards nearby, she found something hidden behind loose paneling. A small telegraph tag, stamped with the year 1951, and on the back written in faded pencil, "Keep it beneath the desk until she returns." No name, no explanation, just that sentence. Clara stared at it for a long time. Her chest tightened strangely, because suddenly the depot no longer felt abandoned. It felt interrupted. That night's sleep refused to come. Rain hammered the roof while Clara sat beneath blankets beside a lantern. The telegraph tag rested in her palm. Keep it beneath the desk until she returns. Who? And return for what? The next morning she examined the desk more closely. The right side scraped slightly whenever moved. Heavier than it should have been. Clara knelt carefully and ran her fingers along the underside. That was when she found it. A tiny carved symbol hidden beneath one drawer. 3 dots. 1 dash. Morse code. Walter had taught her enough to recognize simple letters. The pattern translated to the letter V. Just one letter. Nothing more. But her heartbeat quickened anyway. Because suddenly her grandfather's old stories no longer felt far away. They felt close. Very close. Days passed. Curiosity grew heavier inside her. Clara began studying the office every evening. She tapped walls, measured floorboards, checked beneath rugs. The depot slowly revealed little inconsistencies. One section of flooring sounded hollow. One wall carried newer nails and surrounding boards. And the desk itself sat slightly uneven against the floor, as though something beneath it had shifted over time. Then came the smell, faint, almost impossible to notice at first. Old machine oil, fresh enough to survive beneath decades of dust. Clara froze when she recognized it. Walter's workshop used to smell exactly the same. Suddenly, she remembered another thing he once told her. If somebody hides something properly, they hide it where people stop looking. That night, she couldn't stop thinking about the desk. Around midnight, wind howled through broken roof panels, while Clara carried her lantern into the telegraph office again. The depot groaned softly around her. She placed both hands on the desk and pushed harder than before. At first it barely moved. Then suddenly, a sharp scraping sound echoed across the room. The desk shifted several inches sideways. And beneath it, a narrow square outline appeared in the wooden floor. Clara stared silently. Dust trembled around the edges. Someone had hidden a hatch beneath the desk, and somehow nobody had found it for decades. Her hands shook, part fear, part disbelief, part something else she couldn't explain. Because deep down, she already knew this discovery was connected to something far older than abandoned property. It took Clara nearly 20 minutes to pry the hatch open. The wood had swollen from years of moisture. Finally, it cracked upward with a low groan. Cold air drifted out immediately. Air that smelled dry, old, untouched. Lantern light revealed a narrow compartment beneath the floor. Not large enough for a person. Just a hidden storage cavity reinforced with steel lining. Inside sat a small black metal lockbox. And beside it, a leather journal wrapped carefully in oilcloth. Clara climbed down slowly. The compartment floor felt strangely clean compared to the rest of the depot, like someone had once maintained it carefully. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the journal first. The leather was cracked but preserved. Inside, the cover written neatly in fading ink. Walter Bennett Mercer Hollow Telegraph Office. Clara stopped breathing for a moment. Her grandfather, the depot, the desk, all of it connected. She sat silently beneath the floorboards while rain tapped overhead. Then she opened the journal. Most pages contained telegraph records, train schedules, weather reports, code sequences. But halfway through the writing changed. Personal entries. Hidden ones. Walter described a woman named Vivian Mercer, daughter of the depot owner, in the early 1950s. She had fallen in love with a railway mechanic named Samuel Reed. But Vivian's wealthy father forbade the relationship. Samuel planned to leave town forever. Before leaving, he entrusted Walter with something valuable hidden beneath the telegraph desk until Vivian returned. Then tragedy struck. A rail accident killed Samuel before he could come back. Vivian disappeared from town shortly afterward, and nobody ever claimed what remained hidden beneath the depot. Clara's hands shook harder, turning the final pages. Walter had kept the secret his entire life. Not for greed, for loyalty. The last journal entry was dated only 3 weeks before Walter's death. If nobody returns for it someday, perhaps Clara will understand what to do. Tears filled Clara's eyes instantly, because suddenly she understood. The key, the stories, the unfinished conversations. Her grandfather had been trying to tell her all along. With trembling hands, Clara reached for the lockbox. The rusted brass key around her neck fit perfectly. The lock clicked open. Inside lay stacks of old bank certificates, railway bonds, cash sealed inside wax paper, and beneath them, a velvet pouch filled with gold coins. Not millions, not fantasy treasure, but enough to completely change a life. Clara covered her mouth and cried silently beneath the depot floor. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in years, she felt like someone had still believed in her future, even after they were gone. At the bottom of the box rested one final envelope, written across the front, for the one who stays. Inside was a photograph of Walter standing beside the telegraph desk as a young man, smiling, waiting, keeping a promise no one else remembered. Clara didn't become rich overnight. Most of the railway bonds required legal verification. Some had lost value entirely. Others took months to process. The gold coins helped first. Enough to repair the roof. Enough to buy real food. Enough to survive winter without fear. But the bigger change happened slowly. She restored the depot piece by piece. Locals noticed. At first, they only watched from passing trucks. Then one older mechanic named Earl stopped one afternoon and offered spare lumber. A retired waitress brought coffee sometimes. Someone donated old railway photographs. Little by little, the forgotten depot became alive again. Clara converted the waiting room into a small railway museum and coffee space. Nothing fancy, just warm lights, old stories, clean floors, and music playing softly near the restored telegraph office. Visitors began arriving during weekends. Travel bloggers discovered the depot months later, then history groups, then tourists. But Clara kept one thing untouched, the telegraph desk. She repaired it carefully but never replaced the scratches beneath it. Sometimes late at night, after closing, she still sat there listening to freight trains passing far away. And whenever rain tapped softly against the windows, she thought about Walter, about promises, about forgotten places, about how close she came to disappearing herself. One spring morning, nearly 2 years later, Clara hung a framed photograph beside the telegraph office entrance. Walter Bennett, telegraph operator, keeper of the Mercer Hollow Depot. Below it, she added a small handwritten sentence. Some people protect history, others become part of it. Visitors stopped to read it every day. Most never knew how deeply true it really was. Sometimes the world throws things away too quickly. Old buildings, old skills, old people, even broken dreams. But hidden value rarely disappears. It only waits for someone patient enough to notice it. Clara didn't just inherit money beneath that depot. She inherited trust, memory, legacy, and proof that even forgotten lives can still leave light behind for someone else. Healing didn't arrive all at once. There were still lonely nights, hard winters, bills, fear. But for the first time, Clara stopped feeling invisible. And sometimes that changes a person more than money ever could. 3 years after arriving in Mercer Hollow, Clara stood outside the depot one autumn evening, watching golden light settle across the tracks. The same tracks she once feared beside. The same building she once entered with nowhere else to go. Now warm light glowed through restored windows. Coffee drifted through open doors, and distant train horns echoed softly across the valley. A young traveler stepped inside and asked her quietly, "How did you end up here?" Clara looked toward the old telegraph office, then smiled gently. "I think," she said, "the depot found me first." The wind moved softly through the rails, and somewhere beyond the hills another train passed through the dark, carrying stories toward places still waiting to be remembered. If this story touched you in any way, subscribe to the channel for more slow-burn emotional mysteries like this one. And in the comments, tell us about an object, place, or memory connected to someone you've lost. Sometimes the smallest things carry the longest stories.